Hi, this is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. I hope you enjoyed this Game Industry Insight, a look behind the scenes at game development. And be sure to subscribe and you can pitch future video topics. Alright, for today's Industry Insight, we're going to be returning to the topic of pricing. And this is one that was suggested by a fan a few days ago, and that is what makes a video game worth $60? And as we talked about before, pricing is a very interesting topic and one that we can come back to again and again. And when it comes to the $60 price tag, this is a very big one for developers and consumers alike. On a previous Critical Thought, we talked about the two major qualifiers that dictate value: the quality of the item in question, and of course, the quantity of it. Something that is very rare but not of high quality is going to sell less compared to something that there's very few of them but there are of high quality. And my friend back there, of course, in Amiibo, definitely became the holiday hit season, I believe 2 years ago, when of course Nintendo released them to a very small production line. And of course we could say the same thing about the NES Classic as well. But the video game industry is kind of weird when it comes to pricing, because again, we're talking about code. And when it comes to other industries, it's very easy to put a price tag on some things. If you're building a car, you know exactly how much it costs you for each part, the amount of man hours you put into it, and anything like that. But when it comes to a video game, it's very hard from the consumer side to just see what that value is. And as we've talked about before, the time span when it comes to video games certainly varies. I've seen games that take 6 months to a year to get done. We've seen games that take 5 years plus to get released. And all these games together are operating in the same market. And as we've said, this is a very tricky market thanks to things such as Race to the Bottom, the Steam sales, and of course the major issue of devaluation. And that's where a $60 price tag gets very interesting. When it comes to $60, or for this point we'll just go by full retail, this is considered the cream of the crop. It's the current highest price someone is willing to pay for a game, not counting, of course, collector's editions and stuff like that. And I remember for a time back in the old days where games were like $80, $90, and I think even $100 a pop. But again, we're talking about, I think it was like late 80s, early 90s. And the market has certainly changed since then. And even over the last decade, we can certainly see that as well. In the thousands, for instance, when you bought a $60 game, we usually see that as, an 8 to 10 hour experience, not counting RPGs. And, you're going to get a quality game, no bugs, no major issues like that, and 1, 2, 3, you're done, you go buy the next game. But with the growth of games as a service, and of course the very, very big independent space, things have been shuffled around very badly for a lot of developers. And $60 these days really doesn't get you much, at least in the traditional way. So my question is, if you had the choice between spending $60 on one game, or like myself, I waited for the Steam sale and bought 10 games for $30, what would you do? I think most of us know the answer to that. Now, with that said, of course, I know someone is going to comment about the value that gets tied into it. Because as I said, value and game pricing don't generally go hand in hand. I have played games for $5 to $10 that I've gotten 80 to 100 hours out. I've spent $30, $40 on games I may have gotten 5 to 10 hours out of. And again, we can of course get into the ever popular conversation of what is a video game, but we're 5 minutes in and we don't have the time for that one. And now when it comes to full retail, this is when things get very tricky, because the more money you put into a product, or the more money your price tag is, the more people expect to get out of that. And as we just said, with price and value not always being one-to-one, it makes it very hard to convince someone to spend that money. And the AAA market has certainly had trouble with that in the past. Like I said, 10 years ago, $60 gets you 8 to 10 hours, again, not counting RPGs, and we were all happy with that. But today, we have seen a far different AAA market. Now when you spend $60, you not only get the game, you will usually get some kind of multiplayer mode. And then let's not forget about DLC and the Season Pass. And then maybe there'll be more content beyond the Season Pass. And it becomes, and that $60 now, it's trying to get, or developers are trying to pack more into it instead of lowering the price. And that takes me, there's going to be several big questions I want to ask you folks, especially for developers watching. And the first one is, do you think we will ever see a AAA market that goes down? As we've said, for years now, AAA developers and publishers have been wanting to raise the price of games from $60 to, I think the last time I heard was like maybe $70. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But do you think we will see a day when what's considered full retail could be $45 or $40? I think if we go even any lower, that would be even too crazy for our hypothetical. But even though development costs have been going up, instead of trying to essentially cut development or release smaller games, the AAA market has been, again, trying to stuff things. And that has led to some problems in the past, as we've seen with cases like Spec Ops: The Line, and the developer citing the multiplayer mode as a cancerous tumor in the game. Or, of course, as one of my favorite examples, Dead Space, and how EA kept pushing more and more into that, and basically diluting the series as a whole, to the point that they basically demanded the developer to make 5 million copies sold, or the franchise wasn't considered viable anymore. And as we talked about before, the AAA market or AAA development is not about taking risks. When you have studios with 50, 60-man teams, and even some cases games that are worked on by joint collaborations, you can't just, throw an idea in the air and work on it. And as the other point of that, it also means you can't go small. If you're making a AAA game, you want AAA pricing or AAA funding for that. If a AAA developer spends 3 years of their lives to make, and who knows how much money, to release a game at $10, well, that's going to be very hard to recoup those losses. When it comes to the independent space, however, having smaller teams and smaller budgets has afforded them a lot more flexibility. You can release an experimental game for $5, and if it fails, it sucks, but I am sure you're going to be spending far less compared to a 100-man studio who just spent 3 years working on a game that didn't do so well. But this is, again, goes back to the topic at hand. And what does $60 get you? And as we've said, it doesn't seem like developers want to lower the price or lower development, but it's causing a lot of concerns. And like we said, the higher you go, the harder it becomes to justify it to consumers. And when we say $60 in full retail, the closest analogy would be basically a 5-star restaurant. If I go into a 5-star restaurant and I put down my money, I don't expect to get some refrigerated thing that's been in the freezer for 5 days. I expect a handmade meal right there. That's probably going to cost me, who knows, $40, $50, depending upon where you go. Probably even more than that. I don't get out much when it comes to 5-star dining. But the point is, you expect a level of quality. And the higher the prices, the more that value is. And over the last few years, we have seen other cases of games that have kind of crashed like that. For instance, of course, the big one, No Man's Sky from last year. And this is the very big point. Consumers only see the product. They don't see the team behind it. They don't care that a 5-man team or a 500-man team made a video game. If the price is $60, they expect 5-star treatment. They don't want bugs. They don't want to hear that your game is partially done. And they certainly don't want to hear about you trying to get a emergency day 1 or month 1 patch out to fix issues. Again, if you're going to a brand new car deal or a car dealership and buy a brand new car, you don't expect someone to say, well, the brakes are a few years old, but we'll ship you out some new ones in a few weeks. And getting maximum value from the consumer like that is where things get very tricky. And another big example, of course, would be something like Batman Arkham City, which again, the game was released with so many bugs on the PC side that it doesn't matter if the console side worked, the game was pulled from store shelves. And people are far less willing to accept bugs and issues the higher the price goes. Again, if I buy a $3 game off of Steam, if there's, texture flickering or maybe the game crashes once every 10 starts, okay, I accept that. It's a $3 game. If I buy a $60 game and every other time I load up it crashes to Windows or it doesn't work, you can bet there's going to be a lot of people angry. And this again goes back to another part of this, again, when it comes to putting a price tag on a game. And there's a really big example that I want to talk about. For those of you who have heard or didn't hear about this, the game, let me get the exact name of it, which of course Steam is being slow right now. Here it is, Ark Survival Evolved. This has been an early access game that's been in development now. Let me see, it was released date 2015. And this is, again, in the open world survival genre, with the big hook being, of course, you get dinosaurs that you can ride around in, vehicles, and that kind of thing. It's, again, one of those games that I didn't really get to play. But here's the thing that gets very interesting. When the game was originally released, and for those of you who have bought this, please correct me if I'm wrong. When the game was first released on early access, I believe it was $12 or $15. Again, please correct me on that. And then over the time of development, which I believe it's been in early access for, well, I guess now going on about 2 years, they have actually released a $20 expansion to the game while in early access. And then the big news, and what has caused a lot of issues, has been what happened this past week. Apparently, Ark got picked up for a actual retail release. And let me see if I can actually pull up anything here. Yeah, so the first price change was, I think, in May of 2015. Let's see if there's anything new. Here it is. So it was originally that, and then it's going to be released in August for $60. And let's see if there's anything. I believe the reason they gave is that they're going to be launching this game on consoles as well, and in order to keep the price universal, they're basically bumping it up to $60, and this has got a lot of people upset. And again, it goes back to the topic at hand. Is there $60 worth of quality in that game? I don't know, and I'm sure those of you who have played it, you can answer that one better than I can. But the point is, going up in price like that, especially over the years, is a very big deal. And like I said, the higher that price is, the more scrutiny you're going to put on your game. And I think this could be a very bad move for them, especially considering the fact of the game's development being in early access. As we've seen, or as we've said before, you can lower the price of your game as many times as you want, people will be happy. But raising that price comes with a lot of risks. And going from like 30 to 60 is certainly an interesting one. So the next question is, what do you think about that little price increase? And again, I don't think this is going to work out, considering that there is a very popular open world survival game on the market. It begins with M and ends with Craft. And this reminds me a lot of the MMO crash of the last decade, and how everyone wanted to compete with World of Warcraft. But again, once you become the 800-pound gorilla, any other game in that genre is going to be compared to it. And if one game is $20, well, you can't go higher than that if you're trying to compete in that same market space. Because you either have to do a whole lot new, or you will have to do a whole lot new and different in order to convince someone that your game is not only worth switching over, but also paying 2 to 3 times the amount. But to wrap things up, I have one last question for you folks, and this gets back to the original topic. What makes a game worth $60? Excuse me. And again, we talked about this on an earlier Critical Thought regarding trying to appraise game design. And it's not an easy case, and we are way going over time if we want to talk about that now. But the question for you folks is this. In the comments below, can you name, or in your opinion, name at least 3 factors that you consider to be a requirement of a AAA price? And again, AAA pricing, we're going to stay at $50 to $60. You can be as general or as specific as you want. You could say something like it must have 8 hours of content. Another thing could be it must have at least 10 levels and 5 bosses. Whatever factors or variables you want to put here. Because again, it is very hard to put a price tag on a game. And like we just said with the Ark example, when you have a genre that has so many games in it, every game is going to be judged next to each other. Whether you are a 3-man team or a 50 to 100-man team. Whatever your game is at the end is what people are going to see. And as we said, when it comes to the general lack of education from a lot of consumers, this can create those situations where it's basically treating or seeing games as apples to apples. But as we certainly know when it comes to game development, no 2 video games are alike. And I guess here's one other question that I want to pose to you, which is kind of getting answered more and more as I think about it. But, as I said, the higher the price, the more scrutiny there is. Now, with games such as Ark and No Man's Sky going to the full retail, that happened over an iteration or iterative process. No Man's Sky originally started as a smaller game. It was picked up by Sony. Ark started out as an indie early access game that's now getting the full retail treatment. My question to you is this. Do you think we will see an independent game start right off the bat being priced at $60? No iteration, no going back over development. I'm saying a game that developers start from day one saying, I want to make a $60 game in the independent space. And do you think something like that will work? Anyway, enough doom and gloom. Here is one little peek of my King DDD, I guess, to lighten the mood after all that hard stuff. But again, this is a topic that gets harder and harder, and we even cover, of course, DLC and games as a service. I know I mentioned that earlier, but there's even more to it than that. And I was originally going to talk a little bit more about day one patches and content like that, but that's easily another 5 to 6 minutes, so maybe we'll save that for another vlog. But thank you so much for watching today's Industry Insight. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think about my questions in the comments below. And please, if you have a suggestion for a future topic, let me know as well. But otherwise, check back daily for more design discussions here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And come back around 10 Eastern for regular streaming. For a collection of my writings as well as weekly podcasts on game development, be sure to check out game-wisdom.com. Follow me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day. And to help support everything that I do, you can find me on Patreon under GWBycer or Game Wisdom. Your donations can help to keep things running, and when we hit some goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy. So, thanks again for watching, and be sure to come back for daily discussions on game design on the Game Wisdom channel.